Okay, perfect. So couple of things I want to go over. Our next webinar, this is our second one. Our third one is going to be on March 15th, and that's going to be at 7 p.m. again as well. And that's going to be on training and racing nutrition. We did that last year. It was a very popular webinar. A lot of people asked for us to do another webinar on that topic. It seems to be like a hot topic that people, can't get enough of. So Ashley's going to put together some new things, probably revisit some other things, right, Ashley, and then add some new things to it for this year.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. We do have our spring kickoff event. That's going to be on April 1st this year. So it's a really fun event. If you're able to attend it, it's going to be at the Stone Harbor Yacht Club from 5 to 9, April 1st. You can register right online for that. And I'll be sending out emails and social posts so that you can register for that. It's free for members. If you want to bring a guest, you can bring a guest. The cost is $45. It includes dinner. So we have appetizers, dinner, dessert, and then it will be a cash bar. And then we have a lot of great raffle prizes that we'll be doing as well. And then giving out all your swag for the club for this year. Also track workouts. If you haven't seen the email or the social post about that, track workouts have begun. We're doing those Thursday evening. Nick Holland and James Gruhl, that are two of our members, have just volunteered their time to lead some track workouts for us. They were going to be doing them anyway. So if anyone wants to join them, they're 6 p.m. on Thursdays at the Middle Township track. And again, there's information on that on our calendar, and you can sign up and go join them. And then they will actually have a workout for each week. So you don't have to worry about prepping anything. They'll come prepared, and everyone kind of just does it together and at your own pace. And then the other thing I want to mention is Ashley does offer a discount on her coaching services for our members. So if that's something that you're interested in, she offers our members 15% off. So it's a really nice discount. And you can reach out to me for her contact information. You can reach out to her directly and get more information on that. So real quick, I'm going to actually do a quick introduction, and then I'm going to hand it over to you and you can get started. So Ashley is our second year being our official coaching partner for the Tri Club. So again, we're really excited about that and happy to have her back. And she is an endurance coach and owner of AIM Coaching. She earned her master's degree in exercise physiology in 2012. She is a USAT Level 1 certified coach, a USAT Youth and Junior certified coach, and a USAC Level 3 certified coach. She has coached many athletes to reach the finish line of events ranging from 5Ks to ultra marathons, sprint triathlons through Ironman events, aquabikes, duathlons, endurance open water swims, century rides, and other cycling events and adventure races. She has been training and racing in triathlons and endurance events since 2007, having completed numerous multi-sport and running events. So Ashley, again, thank you so much for putting together this webinar, and I'm going to hand it over to you and let you get to it.
Awesome. Thank you. And again, thank you. Very, very excited to be here. And hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. So let me see here.
You like up downstairs?
So today we're going to talk about endurance training fundamentals, right? So just a high level, we're going to talk about developing your training and racing season and how to map that out, things that you want to consider and think about when doing that. We're going to talk about training measurement and ways that you'll actually measure your training throughout the season. I'm going to show you a sample training week. We'll talk a little bit about strength training. I know some of you were on that strength training webinar we just had, so we'll briefly touch on that. We'll briefly touch on training and racing nutrition, but we do have another webinar coming up specifically on that topic. So that will be a whole presentation in itself. We're going to talk about recovery methods and what's the best approach from that perspective. Talk a little bit about the psychological component, and then race day tips specifically. So first steps, I put this in every one of my presentations, see your PCP before you begin training and make this a priority annually. So we never know what's going on the inside. We might look healthy, we might exercise every day, we might be eating healthy, but sometimes things are just genetic and sometimes things just happen and we don't know that we have something going on in our bodies. So it's always a good idea to just see your doctor before you start any sort of exercise training program, and just to get those regular screenings and make that a priority to just have a long, happy life. So again, you want to understand your baseline and begin where you are. So training is unique to everyone. There's no one size fits all, and I'm a big believer that every person it really should have their own custom training program. So whether you create that yourself or whether someone creates that for you, you are a unique individual with a unique history of training, unique history of injury, unique goals and strengths and weaknesses and imbalances and all those things. So your program should look like anybody else's program. So these are some of the things that, or the main things that you want to look at when you are considering and starting to design your training program. So you want to think about your training history, right? So I'm going to talk on these at sort of a high level. You want to think about your training history. What races have you done in the past? What are your goal races looking forward? And what will that look like for you in your training to come? You want to think about your history of injury. So do you have any sort of injuries from the past, whether that's 20 years ago playing basketball, or you got a rotator cuff injury swimming in the pool last year? So what's your history of injury, and how are you going to manage your training if that is something that might affect it in the future? Are you working with a PT? Do you do strength? Things like that. So considering that perspective. What are your imbalances? So your imbalances in strengths and weakness and limiters. So those kind of they go hand in hand, but thinking about right and left side imbalances, just naturally we all have these right and left side imbalances, and we talked a lot about that in our strength training presentation last time. But considering those imbalances, considering your strengths and weaknesses or limiters. So for most of us are multi-sport athletes, right? We're doing the swimming, biking, run, or the triathlons. So thinking through, where are you strong and where are your areas of opportunity to grow? So you want to play on your strengths, but you also want to work on your weaknesses. And as you design your training throughout the season, you want to think about where can you most effectively, or how can you most effectively build your training program to both play on your strengths and build on your strengths, but also to really work on your weaknesses, your limiters. So that's a really big key component that you want to think about as you're designing your training program. The next is your schedule. So just time management, and that's more thinking ahead. So based on what you've done race-wise in the past, what your training has looked like in the past, and where you want to be. So what races that you have coming up, or what you want to achieve, and just really thinking through realistically how you're going to fit your training in based on your schedule, your family life, and all of that, and what's going to work best for you. So really designing a very thoughtful program that's going to work best with your schedule, best with your family, and all of that. And then location and equipment. So how are you going to get your swimming, biking, running in, right? Where's your access to a pool? Do you have a trainer? Do you ride outside, all the time? And those types of things. And then deciding if you want to invest in a coach or determine a training platform. So by training platform, essentially what I mean is a tool like Training Peaks. There are different resources out there that you can use to actually write your training out on. So Training Peaks is a tool or a resource where you can actually write in your workouts every day, and you can make a whole annual training plan. So you can put your races in for the year and then design your training around those races right in Training Peaks. So it's a great resource to use. I use it with my athletes. So considering something like that. There's also another one called Today's Plan, which is another great resource. So just considering using something like that versus your typical pen and paper, or your calendar on a Word document, that kind of thing. So switching gears and kind of looking ahead at developing your training and racing season, right? And planning ahead and how you're going to actually design this training program. These are the key things, again, and steps that you'll take in mapping that out, and things that you'll want to consider. So the first thing you want to do is determine what races you want to do. It's really common for people to sort of fill their calendar or fill their year with a bunch of races. And that's not a bad thing, but depending on what your goals are, it's not always the wisest decision to jump into every race that's offered, right? You want to be strategic and meaningful in the races that you're choosing throughout the season to achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve. And there are ways that you can design your season and ways that you can structure and choose which races, right, that are going to help you. So if you had a good example for just a lot of the locals here, right, is IMAC, right? I'm Ironman 70.3 Atlantic City. That's a 70.3. You wouldn't want to necessarily put like a 70.3 a month before that, right? Because that's gonna put you at great risk for injury. But doing Atlantic City Triathlon I think that's 4 weeks out from IMAC, is a great pre-race to that, because you're going to work out some kinks, you're going to get to know the course and all of that good stuff heading into that race. So just really thinking about what's a meaningful calendar year for you. And when you think about your races, I don't know, maybe you have heard the term A races, B races, and C races. So your A races are the races those are your heavy hitters. That's your biggest goal for the year. You might have 1, 2, or possibly 3 A races throughout the year. Generally speaking, you want those A races to be spaced ideally, and again, depending on the distance, about 12 weeks apart. So if you were going to do 2 70.3s, you would want to have those be at least 12 weeks apart, ideally, to be able to recover from the one and then rebuild for that second one and reduce your risk for injury and perform at your peak again for that second race. When it comes to those B races, the B races are the races where you're going to work out some kinks. You're not pushing to push as hard as you can go and really PR or anything like that, but those are races that you use to prep you for the A races. So B races, you might put a sprint triathlon 3 or 4 weeks out from like a big A Olympic triathlon, right? If that's your first Olympic race. Or you might, in the example I already used, you might put the Olympic Atlantic City Triathlon prior to IMAC, right? So using smaller races or other races to help prep you for those bigger races, to work out any kinks in transition, get your system down fluid, and just feel prepped and more prepped for the race. And then your C races are your casual social races. So those are things that you might do for a cause. It's something you might do just with, the Wild Harbor Tri Club, just with friends, just fun races that you don't do for time. So one of the things that I always like to talk about is, again, when you're doing these races and when you're thinking about these A, B, and C races, make sure that you actually race them as A, B, and C races, because sometimes, again, what can happen is when we go out and we have A, B, and C races on our calendar, sometimes those C races and B races become A races in the race because we can't hold back, right? We're excited and we go and we push too hard, even though it's supposed to be a B race or a C race. And so what that does is it's going to limit your performance in those A races. And if you do that too much throughout the season, you're going to either burn out mentally or you're going to put yourself at greater risk for injury. So just thinking through all of that as you're designing your season. And then getting to these two bullet points that I have here, make sure that they're meaningful for you and that it's not something that you're doing out of some like fear of missing out or trying to prove something, right? So sometimes what can happen, especially if we're thinking about long distance races, right? Like 70.3s, Ironmans, ultras, those types of things, is some people might be, there might be some chatter about people doing doing a race. And then we're like, well, I don't want to miss out on a race, right? I don't want to miss out, like if the club's doing it and things like that. But really think about, is that a meaningful race for you? Does that make sense for you to do this year based on your commitments at hand already, what you actually want to do, and does it make sense? And the reason I'm saying this is because when we sign up for races out of FOMO or trying to prove something, oftentimes we don't train like we should. And we end up not hitting some of the goals that we would like to hit. So I like to always just talk that through. So the second thing, once you pick your races, right, is you want to set goals. So you've heard of SMART goals, right? I don't need to hammer this point home, but it is important to bring up that you want your goals to be specific, right? Measurable, achievable, and time-bound. So thinking about the races that you've done previously, what your times were there, what your goals are for this year, what your races are for this year, and what can you realistically achieve based on the time that you have in training before that race or those races to hit these goals. So really think through the SMART goals, right? And then consider setting mini goals for accountability and motivation. So you might say, hey, for IMAC this year, I want to be, sub 6 hour finisher time. So that's your goal. That's your main goal, right? Your A goal. So then your mini goals might be along the way that, okay, by April, I want to have gotten to at least 30 miles on the bike outside on 2 occasions, right? So you're really building your foundation. So that's an example of a mini goal along the way to those greater goals. So you're holding yourself accountable. So it's always smart to really set those mini goals and you can track that all in those training tools I talked about earlier, things like Training Peaks and Today's Plan. Third is know the course. So it's really important that you're training on the same terrain that you're going to race in. So one of the biggest rules of training for a race is specificity, right? So if we're doing a triathlon, we need to be swimming and biking and running. But on top of that, if we're doing a hilly triathlon, we need to be doing hilly biking and hilly running. Or if it's on trails, we need to make sure we're hitting the trails in advance. Or if it's in like a super choppy ocean swim and we've never swam in the ocean before, making sure that we're getting that ocean swimming experience prior to race day. That's going to ensure your best experience and your greatest confidence heading into race day and your best time based on your training that you put in going into that race. So just making sure that you're looking at the course, because sometimes you might think, okay, this is on road, but some courses actually are on trails or they're on gravel and you just don't realize it. And you really got to look through the athlete guides, right? And just make sure that you understand what you're going to be training on or racing on race day, and just take that into account in your training program. And then that next bullet is how many aid stations, what resources are provided, and at what mile markers. So that really comes in much more so, and we'll talk about this actually in our next webinar about the training and racing nutrition. But having an understanding of how many aid stations are on the bike course, how many aid stations are on the run course, what is provided at these aid stations, so that we need to eat in our endurance races. Again, if it's over 60 to 75 minutes, we need to be fueling with that carbohydrate. We always need to be hydrating with water, but after 60 to 75 minutes, we've got to be fueling, right? So what resources are provided at these aid stations, so we know in advance if I'm bringing my own nutrition or am I going to rely on the nutrition there? And also, if I bring my own nutrition but I run out, or it just isn't hitting well that day for some reason, knowing what resources are at that race in advance and having tested them out on a few occasions prior to race day is always a really good idea, so it sits well. And then at what mile markers. So again, that's really crucial in planning out your nutrition, so your fueling strategy for race day. So again, we'll talk a lot more about that specifically in our upcoming presentation, but just having a really good understanding of, hey, I'm doing a 70.3. Generally speaking, most 70.3s have 3 aid stations on the bike course, right? So I'm going to have 2, got my aero hydration system. I'm going to have 1 bottle in my down tube cage. And then I've got my saddle cages. So I'll grab a water bottle at every aid station so that I've got cold water and I can refill. And so just planning out things like that, knowing in advance where they're at, how much water you have, and so you're going to have a fluid race experience. The fourth is know the area. So this is more for destination events, right? But just making sure that you know the area in which you're racing. So if you're sea level or below most of the time, and you have a very hilly mountainous race and you've never trained at altitude, that is the last thing that you want to go into fresh on race day. So knowing the differences in altitude that you might be experiencing at the race, differences in temperature, right? And having that experience prior to heading into race day. And then also just knowing the area for travel considerations and how you're going to transport your bike, how you're going to, where you're going to stay, where your family's going to stay, all those types of things. And then fifth, know your schedule. So again, we talked about this a little bit, but understanding what it's going to take to get to your goals and how this is going to affect your family and your overall schedule, and then communicating that and making sure that you're really open with your family about what it's going to take to get you to these goals, and how much training you're going to need to put in every week from like an hour perspective, right? So they have an understanding, because a lot of times when it's like, if it's like your first triathlon and your family doesn't know anything about triathlon, they don't, they've never done it before. It's a shock both to the triathlete and the family. So just having that really open communication. So now we're going to talk about the meat and potatoes. So we're going to talk about training measurement, right? So when it comes to designing your training program and actually building your exercises, right? What you're going to do every day and every week, you have to have a way to measure it, right? So the way that we measure our training is in 3 ways: frequency, volume, and intensity. First, we build in frequency, right? So most of, I think everybody here is solid on that consistency, right? So our frequency or our consistency in training, it's how many days a week, or are you consistent in your training? Actually, I'll go to the next slide. So we measure our frequency through days per week, right? So we have to build on our frequency before we build on our volume. And then we have to build on our volume before we start to layer in our intensity. And it's important to know that, because when we do it in that approach, we reduce our risk for injury in the long run. So all of training for everyone from newbie through advanced is essentially this model of, am I consistent in my training? How many days a week am I getting in? What's the volume of my training? And then layering in that intensity. And as we progress, it's just that this model stays the same, but it just changes or gets a little bit more difficult as we continue to reach higher and higher level goals, right? So, for example, someone who's new to triathlon, they might be doing 3 runs a week, and they're, maybe they're jogging for 5 minutes, walking for 2, jogging for 5 minutes, walking for 2. And then as they become solid with that, they can pick it up to jogging for 10 minutes, walking for 1, jogging for 10 minutes, walking for 1, whatever that looks like for that person, right? It's kind of a weird example, but you get the point of where you're gonna start lower and then you're gonna build your way up. So frequency is measured with days per week. Volume, we measure volume through either time or mileage, right? So how many hours do I run? How many hours am I running this week? Or how many miles on the bike am I riding this week, right? So we measure volume through either time or mileage. When it comes to intensity, this is where it gets a little bit more tricky. So frequency and volume are obviously, they're relatively easy. That's a very consistent measurements that we're all very familiar with. With intensity, this is where if we add too much too soon, that's where our risk of injury really drastically increases. So we measure intensity in 4 different ways in our swimming, biking, and running. So through a rating of perceived exertion, or RPE, so like a Borg scale of 1 to 10, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your run for the day? For an easy run, it's like a 2, right? Like your easy long runs you'd think of as an RPE of 2, 10 being your maximal output, 1 is your minimal, like you feel like you're doing hardly anything, just very light effort. So RPE scale. Heart rate is the second one. So we measure that in beats per minute, right? So I always suggest with heart rate, you've probably heard of people using heart rate training before. Has anyone ever used heart rate training before, or like heard of it? So I think with heart rate, I'm not a big fan of using heart rate based training. Because it's very reactive, right? So we go and run, and then it takes a little bit for our heart rate to increase. And then we dial it back a little bit, and it takes a while, a couple minutes, for our heart rate to decline. So it's very reactive to what we're doing. It doesn't happen instantaneously. It's not a direct output in that given moment. It's just a reactive measurement. So when it comes to heart rate, I think it's really good to have an understanding of what your maximal heart rate is, or what your estimated maximal heart rate is, and just what your heart rate is, generally speaking, in your training, right? For your moderate runs and things like that, just knowing what's normal for you, but not necessarily using it to base your training on. So that's just my perspective, but heart rate, some people do use heart rate zones for their training. What's more impactful though is your pace or your power. So for pace, you can do this, right? For it's either miles per hour or minutes per mile. So you can use your pace on the bike and the run, right? So how fast are you running? What's, I'm doing 7 minutes per mile, or on the bike, I'm doing 20 miles per hour, right? If you have a power meter, you can also measure the bike in watts. You can also, there's running power meters too, but we're not going to get into that because but with your bike, this is actually a really effective way to measure your output on the bike is through a power meter. So does anybody have a power meter here on this call? Okay, so if you, power meters are a great tool. If you ever, like if you're considering long distance races, or if you do long distance races and you want to really start focusing on like 70.3s or Ironman events, I think a power meter is a really wise investment because it shows you understand exactly what you're putting out, right? And based off of that, you can actually, there's different percentages that you can use to, based off of your threshold data in your training, that you can use to actually plug in on race day and say, okay, I would need to hold a power or a wattage of between this and this. And that will actually give you your best performance on the bike and your best performance on the run. So I know that doesn't make sense because I'm not diving into that here, but a power output is a really great resource for anyone who's doing those longer endurance races and wants to make that your goals. But if you're ever curious about power meters or want to talk more about that, don't hesitate to reach out. But so these are our 4 essential ways to measure our training, right? So RPE, heart rate, pace, and power. So having an understanding of what tools do you have at your disposal. Everybody can use RPE. That's use your RPE for the swimming, biking, and running, right? Because that's just a how am I feeling in the moment? Am I hitting, if I'm trying to hit a 7 out of 10, am I hitting that 7 out of 10? We can all gauge that feeling, right? Heart rate, we've all got, for the most part, people have their heart rate monitors. If not, you can feel your heart rate here too. And then pace, again, it's using your Garmin, using your Apple Watch. And then if you have that power meter, using your output there. But a really good rule of thumb when you're designing a training program is to think through the 80-20 principle. So when it comes to these 3 ways that we measure our training, right? Our frequency, volume, and intensity, you want to think of it this way. So generally speaking, you want to keep 80% of your training at a low intensity and 20% of your training in that moderate to high intensity. So again, looking at your RPE, that RPE scale of 1 to 10, 10 being maximal effort, that 80% of your training or the bulk of your training should be in an RPE of 1 to 3. So really, really low intensity training. And then that last 20% should be in that RPE of 4 to 10 or zones 3 to 5. So if you use training zones, that's listed there also. So just getting an understanding of the meat and potatoes of your training are those foundational runs, those long, slow, easy runs, those long, slow, easy bike rides, those longer, slower open water swims where you're just out there and you're building that foundation. And then that last 20%, that's where you're hitting the high intensity. And that's going to keep you, again, at a reduced risk for injury, but also help you to reach your speed goals. So then taking that a little bit further, some training rules of, these are some training rules of thumb, but kind of digging a little bit deeper. When you think of your volume and peak volume that you'd want to reach before race day. So again, this can be different for each race, and it's definitely different depending on your goals, right? So a newbie would be vastly different than someone who's very advanced in the sport. But generally speaking, you want to reach 85% of the distance for each leg of the race on 2 to 3 occasions prior to race day. So if you're doing an Ironman, you want to reach 85% of the distance in the swim on at least 2 to 3 swim sessions prior to race day, 85% of the bike, right? So that's about 90 miles, 2 to 3 times before race day, or 100 miles, 90 to 100 miles. And then same thing with a run. And then that holds true for like sprint, Olympic, and then 70.3 as well. But with those sprint Olympic, again, depending on your goals, most of us can get in more than 85% of our training in the sprint, right? So we can get in, we're generally getting in way more than 400 yards of swimming in the pool every time we hit the pool. So it holds true, and that's what you need, but thinking through, again, specifically what your goals are in the races that you're doing, this will look a little bit different. And then think quality over quantity. So we want that volume, we want those foundational runs, we want to hold true to that 80-20 rule. But one of the biggest mistakes that people make going into triathlon training is thinking that I need to go out and I just need to hammer, like I just need to go out and ride the bike for 6 days a week, and I need to get in 50 miles every time I'm doing it, and they're just out there and they're riding and they're running and they're just getting in all this volume, but they're not getting the intensity in. So that's another mistake that can be made. And that's great, that's building your foundation, and you're really building your foundation, but you're not going to hit speed goals if you're not getting that speed work in. And that's true for the swim, the bike, and the run. And then that strength training component is really essential, again, for those those speed goals. And then, okay, so from an injury prevention perspective, when you think about each training week that you build out, you don't want to build out your intensity or your overall volume and intensity by any more than 10% a week. So if you're doing 10 miles on the run total this week, you wouldn't want to do any more than 11 miles on the run next week, right? So it's just adding that extra 10% in weekly. And again, that's a general rule of thumb to help reduce your risk for injury. And really remember that that's both volume and intensity. And then when you think about your actual training and the design for the week, you want to aim for 3 sessions a week per leg. So for swimming, biking, and running, if you can, again, not everybody can get in 3 sessions a week per leg based on their schedules, but if you can, aim for 3 sessions a week per leg. Make one of those sessions a long session. So like your long ride, your long run, your long open water swim, right? Or your long pool session. Make one of those a higher intensity session. So again, that holds true for the swim, the bike, and the run. That could be your fartlek run. That could be your tempo run. That could be your track workout on Wednesdays, right? And then a brick or an easy session. So long, high intensity, and then easy. Those would be your 3 key sessions per week for the swim, the bike, and the run. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like in just a second. And then establish a baseline and measure your progress. So it's really important in your training that you have a way to measure, and not talking frequency, volume, intensity, but that you have a way to measure your progress in general. So I did a good way to do this is like with your running, like you might do 5Ks intermittently throughout your training, right? And at the beginning of the season, you do a 5K and you know your speed is this. And then at the end of the season, you know the 5K and you know your speed is now this. So it's just a way to understand and measure your progress and see your gains over time. There are certain field assessments that you can do and things like that that are more standardized in order to kind of establish a baseline, measure your progress, and track zones, but that's a whole hour conversation in itself. But just identifying what is a way that you can specifically establish a baseline and measure your progress. And that could be something as simple as hopping in the pool for 10 minutes and seeing how many laps you can get in 10 minutes, right? It's just establishing a baseline. And then let's say you're consistent in the pool for 4 months, and then boom, you're in the pool again, you do another 10 minutes. Or let's say you do 1,000, right? You do 1,000 yards. So you might do 1,000 yard, again, that's a threshold field assessment, 1,000 yards in the pool. How long does it take you? And then 3 months later, or 6 to 8 weeks later, whatever it is, you do another one. If you've been consistent in training, are you seeing the gains there, right? So just establishing that baseline off the bat and then measuring your progress throughout. It's a good way to show, is the training that you're designing effective in what it is that you're trying to do, right? And is your body responding how you think it should be responding? And then lastly, get in some practice races. So this is, again, we've talked about the A, B, and C races, but really think about, if you're going for some new races that you've never done before, whether it's a new type of race or a new distance that you've never tackled before, think about getting some practice races in ahead of time, especially if there's areas that make you a little fearful, right? So like if you're tackling an Ironman this year and you've never swam more than a mile in open water, maybe you go out and you do Poverty to Cove this year, right? Like you do that 2.4 mile open water swim. It's standalone race, but it's ahead of race day. And so now you're confident, I can swim 2.4 miles in the water. So getting these practice races is more about building that confidence and prepping your confidence for race day. So here's a sample of an in-season training week. I shared several of these in our last one. So I know most of you have probably looked at these and seen something similar from our last presentation. But when you think about the rules that I just talked about here, you can see that laid out in this training session, right? So we've got the swim, the bike, the run, strength, and flexibility, and then all the days of the week. So you can see that every leg has 3 workouts in it. And then I've added 2 strength sessions as well, because strength training is really, really important and critical. So you can see you've got a long open water swim, speed and drills in the pool, and then an open water swim. So you have that long session, you've got the HIIT, like the higher intensity session, and then you've got the easy session. Same thing for the bike. You've got hill repeats, a brick workout, and then a long ride. So again, you've got that high intensity session by doing hill repeats, the brick workout, and then you've got your long easy ride. And then for the run, you've got your tempo run. So again, that's your high intensity run, your brick workout, and then your long run on Saturday. So we're achieving all of those in the course of the week, and it's a little bit more fluid. And then you've got your strength training in there twice a week, which again, we'll talk a little bit more about that to come, but I know many of you were on that session about 3 weeks ago. So that leads us into strength training. So for those that weren't on that call, strength training is essential for reaching your goals with endurance training. So it's shown to have many benefits into endurance training. It will reduce fatigue in latter portions of long endurance events. It's going to increase your power, and on the bike, it's going to increase your run, your run power and strength, your endurance, and it's going to improve your form in the pool, especially when you think of it from a core perspective. And then on top of that, strength training is essential for your longevity and good health and good mobility for life. So I don't want to stress that too much because I did that a lot on our last presentation, but strength training is essential for life and for good performance. So these are the general guidelines that you want to think of when you're first starting a strength program. So you can see I've laid out exactly what you would want to do and the rules that you want to follow when it comes to strength training. So you can see your frequency, you want to hit 2 to 3 days per week on non-consecutive days. You want to have at least 48 hours of rest in between sessions. So you might go to the gym and you might want to lift, like in my previous example, I have that Monday and Friday lift, right? So there's at least 48 hours of rest in between the strength sessions. You want to hit all your major muscle groups, and those are listed here. You want to shoot for 2 to 4 sets and 8 to 12 reps per exercise. So that might be like 8 to 12, like bicep curls is just your most common example, right? You might do 8 to 12 reps of your bicep curl and do that 2 to 4 times. And then your rest, you want to get at least 2 to 3 minutes rest per set. And when it comes to strength training, again, you really want to never sacrifice your technique for the use of heavier weights or for speed even. So form is essential when you think of your strength training, because whenever we add a load to the body, if we're not moving well, we're going to sacrifice, our form is sacrificed, and we're putting ourselves at increased risk of injury. So we're not moving well already, and we place a load on us by lifting some weights or holding the barbell, right? So that's the load. We're really exacerbating our risk for injury long term. So making sure that you're moving correctly in all of the exercises that you're doing is essential for strength training. And don't be afraid of going to the gym too. I always like to stress this. A lot of people, especially if you've never lifted before, are nervous to go into a gym and lift weights. And don't be nervous, because everyone a lot of people like me, we're always thinking about, who's watching us or who's watching me, what I'm like, is anybody watching me lift? Are they watching what I'm doing? And most of the time people, they're not paying attention to you. And a lot of the people that are in the gym, not everybody does lift right, even if it looks like they've been there lifting for a long time. Never assume that what someone else is doing is the right way to do it. Always make sure that you know what the right way is with your form, but just have that confidence, go into the gym. And after you do that, 2 or 3 times, it won't even be, it'll be a non-issue. You'll build that confidence right up. So then training and racing, training and racing nutrition. So I wanted to touch on this a little bit. We have a whole presentation dedicated solely to our training and racing nutrition, but it's really important to think about your training and racing nutrition, and then your general nutrition overall, and how that impacts your performance, what you can get out of each exercise session that you're doing, how it affects your recoveries between sessions, how it affects race day, how it affects your recovery coming out of race day, and then just how it affects your life and good health in general. So the goals, I just listed out the goals here, that the high level, what you want to meet and what we think about with our nutrition when it comes to training and racing. So we want to meet the energy and fuel demands to support our training and racing, right? So this one is huge. If we're not getting enough food to meet the demands that we're placing on our body, we put ourselves at a very big increased risk for injury. And a lot of times, like, some of these injuries might come over a long period of time. So like a stress fracture is a great example of not meeting those energy demands. So what can happen sometimes is if we're doing all this exercise, right, but we're not getting enough fuel to repair and recover and replace what we're losing, weeks and months can go by and we feel fine, but we can all of a sudden get a stress fracture that occurred over time. We just didn't know was occurring over time because we just weren't meeting our energy demands. So that's a good example of something that could come from not meeting those energy demands. So just making sure that you're getting enough food. We're going to go into a lot of detail in our next presentation, but just making sure that you're getting what you need to support your training and racing. And then achieving and maintaining good body composition for good health and good performance, right? So we want to eat and enjoy our food, but we don't want to eat too much, right? We want to have good health and a good weight management, but we also want to have good performance. So with triathletes, generally speaking, a leaner composition is better for greater performances. We want to optimize our training, recovery, and adaptation. So I touched base on that earlier, but just making sure that we're fueling our exercise sessions that have, and I'll dive into this, but we're fueling in our exercise sessions so that we're getting the most out of each session that we're putting in, or maximizing our recovery and our adaptations. We want to maintain good health and build and maintain a strong immune system. So we want to stay healthy. So again, if we're not eating what we need, if we're not meeting those fuel demands, if we're not getting an abundance of color in our diet, eating those fruits and vegetables, or getting a multivitamin in as sort of that insurance, we can have a decrease or like a weakened immune system. So making sure that we're getting those in. And then practice our race nutrition and hydration strategies that work well for the unique individual. So I touched base on this earlier a little bit when I was talking about aid stations, but just making sure that throughout your training, you're really working on what works for you, your nutrition strategies on the bike and the run, right? So I'm just really working on that so that on race day, you feel confident that what you have on race day works well for you, doesn't cause any sort of GI distress, and you can go in not even thinking twice about what it is that you're going to fuel your body with. And then tapering correctly before events, carb loading for optimal performance. So again, more and more research is coming out on tapering, and for just different groups, right? So now it's saying that, like, new research is coming out saying that women in the peri post-menopause, tapering actually has adverse effects for those groups of people. But generally speaking, men and women, if we taper from before big events that are Olympic distance and above, essentially, that's going to help your race day performance. And then enjoy what we eat. So we always want to enjoy what we eat, right? We don't want to limit ourselves so much that we're not, we're training hard and we're not enjoying what we eat. So we want to make sure that we're actually like enjoying our food and living life well. So when it comes to the actual guidelines for your training, race, nutrition, you want to aim for 30 to 60 grams of carb in either liquid, solid, or gel for any exercise that lasts over 60 to 75 minutes. So we have enough supply in our own body to get us through 60 to 75 minutes. So if you're doing a bike ride that's an hour and 15 minutes, you don't need any extra fuel or nutrition. Water, always. So always follow these hydration guidelines, right? We want to always make sure that we're getting at least 25 to 30 ounces of fluids per hour. And that's generally speaking. So on a hotter day, you might want a little bit more. On cooler days, you might want a little bit less. But we always want to hydrate, right? But when it comes to our fuel and getting the carb in, we want to aim for 30 to 60 grams for anything that's over that 60 to 75 minute range. So if you have a 2-hour ride, you might take, 3 gels. You might take one at 30 minutes, one in an hour, one in an hour 30, and then you're good to go for that whole ride. So an example of about 25 to 30 grams of carb would be like a gel. So, I mean, most of you are most people familiar, and have you, fueled while you've exercised before? Okay. So a gel would be about 25 to 30 grams of carb, half a pack of shot blocks. So what you see pictured here, that's about 25 grams of carb. 8 ounces of Tailwind or Gatorade is going to be close to that 25, 30 grams of carb. So just different examples. Your honey stinger, again, same thing. That will be around that 25 to 30 grams. So per hour, you would want to eat 2. You'd want to have that whole pack of shot blocks, or you'd want to have 2 gels or 2 honey stingers or 16 ounces of Tailwind, right? To meet this requirement. So it's really important that in your training sessions, you're practicing that so that you know, again, what works best for you on race day. And we'll talk much, much more about this in our next presentation. But making sure that even now and before we have that conversation, that you're starting to put this rule into play. And also to recognize that it's not about the calories. When you get to Ironman distance events, you want to think of calories because the day is so long. You think about the carbs, but you also can think about the calories. But when you think of our macronutrients, right? So our carbohydrate, our protein, and our fat, in exercise, we want that carb. The goal is to get that carbohydrate because that's what's going to fuel the body, fuel those working muscles to be able to perform like we want them to perform. Protein and fat, research has shown, have no benefit. Taking in protein and fat while we're exercising has no benefit. We need to actually get in this carbohydrate. So that's what we need in exercise. So just thinking that through. And then when it comes to recovery, thinking from a larger picture, sleep is our #1 recovery tool. Research shows that endurance athletes need at least 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. So we need more than the average individual. And it makes sense. We don't necessarily need research to show us this, but research has been done to show that we need at least that 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night. So your sleep is essential. If you're not getting enough sleep, you can take your goals and throw them out the window because you will put yourself at an increased risk of injury. You're going to put yourself at an increased risk of mental burnout. And you just have to make sure that you're getting that consistent, good sleep as frequently as you can, because it's essential for endurance training and essential for reducing your risk of injury, essential for getting the repair that your body needs, growing and adapting to the training that you're putting on your body day in and day out. So sleep is the #1 tool that's going to maximize your training, reduce your risk of injury, and help you perform the best on race day. The second thing is nutrition. So while this isn't recovery per se, this is recovery. So these first three buckets here are the key things that you want to think of when it comes to recovery. Your sleep. Am I getting what I need from a nutritional perspective? Am I eating enough throughout the day to meet the demands I'm placing on my body? And am I getting the nutrition I need in each exercise session that has anything that lasts 60 to 75 minutes or longer, right? So two things you want to think about with nutrition. And is your diet well-rounded? Is it well balanced? Are you getting in the fruits and vegetables that you should be getting in? And then thinking about recovery weeks and recovery days. So in your training, you want to build in recovery weeks and recovery days, right? So for the most part, you want to have one recovery day every week. So it doesn't matter what day it's on, but just making sure that every week you have at least one recovery day where you don't do any exercise. And again, this is for endurance athletes. If you're just meeting the general exercise guidelines, that rule doesn't necessarily follow suit. But if you're truly taking on greater loads and really training for endurance events very consistently and in swimming, biking, running, strength training, then you need that recovery day, right? And you also need recovery weeks. So every 3 to 4 weeks, you should build in a recovery week. So I'm going to go back for a second so I can show you. When we look at this sample week, right? So you might have 3 weeks that look similar to this. And then that 4th week, you would reduce both volume and intensity from that week. So the goal for that recovery week is to truly recover. You want to be rested. You want to have mornings where you're not hitting the pool and waking up at 4 a.m. to go hit the pool 3 mornings a week, right? You want to get in extra rest. So we're getting more sleep. We want to have time potentially maybe on Saturday, Sunday for an extra nap or whatever it might be. But just making sure that you're building in a recovery week every 3 to 4 weeks in your training. So big 3: sleep, nutrition, recovery weeks, and recovery days. So from there, these are other tools that you want to consider and that you would want to do. So static and dynamic stretching. So it's imperative that you stretch. You have to stretch. So static stretching is what you think of when you hold a pose and you stretch, right? So if I were to bend down and stretch out my hamstrings and just hold that pose for 10 to 30 seconds, that's your typical static stretch, right? Dynamic stretching is what you think of pre-workout. So that might be some lunges or some, like Frankenstein's or whatever before your strength session, or maybe before a high intensity run. Static and dynamic stretching has been shown to have benefits, or is shown to have benefits on your recovery and repair. So just making sure that you're getting in, again, that static stretching mainly after exercise. So stretching those key muscle groups, and then dynamic stretching before your workouts. And then from there, if anybody has like Normatec boots, your graded compression does show to increase recovery. So the research studies that I've seen and looked at with things like Normatec boots, right, your graded compression boots, that compares three different things. So what they do in those studies is they take a look at people who do exercise, and then they'll compare three different things, recoveries at the end. So they'll do an active recovery, which is your cool down, right? So that, like, think of a cool down as like after your track session, you walk around the track for 10 to 20 minutes, right? That's your cool down. Or on the bike, you spin light after a hard session for 10 to 20 minutes. And I'm just giving 10 to 20 minutes as an example, but that's your active recovery. Let's think of that as like your cool down. It's your active recovery. Then they would use Normatec boots and put that on. They put the people in the supine position, so laying down, and they put the Normatec boots on, right? And then they compare that also to a passive recovery, so someone just laying down. So they look at active recovery versus Normatec boots, right? Normatec boots versus that passive recovery. And the reason I'm telling you this is because that active recovery and the Normatec boots show essentially the same results, and actually active recovery has more recovery benefits than those Normatec boots. So Normatec boots aren't critical for endurance athletes. They're a nice to have, and in a healthy population, right? I'm talking healthy population, asymptomatic. But that active recovery, your cool down post workout is actually more beneficial than using those recovery boots. So just something to think about if you're on the fence, but they are really nice if you do like are interested in getting those, like just from like a mental perspective, it's like a nice massaging benefit. So, and then devices and tools like your foam roller, your Theragun, or like Hyper Ice, different like massage tools, those are at hand too. So those again don't have a lot of research shown benefits to improving your recovery, but they're more of a feel good thing to do post session. So then looking at the psychological component, this is a really big aspect of endurance sport. So there's moments in your training and a race day where you're going to feel like you're completely unprepared, and you're going to feel like you're not ready. So I just listed out a few of the things here, like you're going to feel like you're unprepared. You might compare yourself to others, or you might say, I think, I didn't get enough training heading into race day. You're going to start getting anxiety. You might have butterflies in your stomach. It's really, really common to talk yourself out of how well you can do. So you'll have a goal going in, and then you'll go to the race and you'll start looking around. You'll just start getting nervous. And a lot of times we go in there, we look at the other athletes and we're like, dang, like, I don't look like that person, or whatever it might be. And you start to downplay how well you can really do. I think most of us do this at every race that we go into, no matter the ability level. And we start to talk ourselves out of how well we can do. So recognizing that these things are extremely common is the first step to getting through some of the psychological games that we play with ourselves. So these things that we think, it's critical to understand that these thoughts and feelings are normal. They're common and happen to everyone, and then they're temporary. And it's really important in that moment. So whether it's in your training leading into the race, or if it's on race day and you start to experience some of these things, it's critical that you recognize that how you react in that moment plays a role in how you're going to react in similar circumstances in the future. So if you give up per se in whatever it is that you're doing, or you give up in the race, or you just decide not to do it because you're scared or you're fearful or you're having those feelings, you're much more likely to actually do that again in similar circumstances in the future. And this isn't just in training and racing, this is in life circumstances as well. So it's really, really important to step into your fears each and every time they occur and not let those things hold you back. And then you can think about these key areas. So again, research has shown visualization is really, really beneficial in helping us to move through some of these fears that we might run into, or that we might start, some of these things that we might start saying to ourselves. But just visualizing yourself as strong and limitless, visualizing yourself in each aspect of the race, right? Having a smooth swim, having a powerful bike ride, being fast and efficient on the run, getting through your transitions with ease, and crossing that finish line successfully, confidently, and happy. Has shown to have a lot of that visualization research shows has a lot of success. And again, it's finding what works best for you. Visualization doesn't work for everybody, but it does work. So, and then thinking about these key areas. So really think about in these areas here, your motivation, your confidence, your thought habits, your focus, and your visualization. Where are you strong, and where is there an area of opportunity to place a little bit more focus and build up those areas so that you run into these a little bit less frequently, or that you can push past it when you do. And then some other ways that you can step into that is to connect with a sports psychologist. So Green Psych, he's local. That's just a great resource. Lots of sports psychologists out there that you can reach out to. Lean into your family, friends, Wild Harbor Tri Club for support. So both, again, in your training and on race day, attending group workouts, having that training buddy that's going to hold you accountable, who's going to help you, step into your confidence, and teach you different things like race day preparation and just building those friendships, for the rest of your life. Practicing patience. So just again, recognizing when we recognize that those feelings that we have, they're normal, they're common, and they're temporary, being patient with yourself and giving yourself grace for just feeling those things, because a lot of times we can be too hard on ourselves and get frustrated. So just practicing patience and giving yourself some grace. And then tuning out distractions. So keeping your confidence high and never comparing yourself to others. And then a few additional recommendations. I know we're running past the time here. Get a bike fit. It's really important to get a bike fit. That's the biggest, one of the biggest things that's going to maximize your power output on the bike. It's going to put you in the best position possible on your bike based on you, your goals, your current state of fitness and flexibility, all of that, to reduce your risk of injury, have the greatest comfort on the bike, and achieve maximal power, again, based on all those things. Learn how to improve your swim, bike, and run form. So don't just focus again on that volume, frequency, and intensity, but think about from an efficiency perspective and how can you eliminate some of that wasted energy and delay your onset of fatigue in all three aspects. And then learn how to pump your tires and how to change a flat tire. So this is critical, and we actually will have a clinic coming up in the spring on this specific topic. And then I just got some race day tips here. So set your goals. We talked about that. Read the athlete guide. Recognize that there are rules, and we got to follow those. There's drafting rules and all those types of things. For some races, there are cutoff times, so just being aware of those cutoffs. Memorizing your transition space. Seed yourself correctly in the swim. This one's important. I think sometimes what we do, especially if we go with groups of people, is we won't seat ourselves appropriately, or we don't even know how to seat ourselves appropriately. And seating yourself correctly or to the best of your ability is beneficial for you and all the athletes around you. So if you're going to races with groups of people, try to still seat yourself correctly, even if you're not in the same swim speed as all your training buddies, because that's just going to set you up for your greatest race experience possible. Listen to your body and keep a fluid mindset. So even in our training, we never know, even if we have a great season of training, on race day, our body can sometimes just react differently than we think it's going to, based on the temperatures that day, based on just the race conditions, whatever it might be. So always listen to your body and keep a fluid mindset. Respect the distance. So no matter what distance you're doing, and even if you've raced it before, even if you've podiumed at that distance before, always respect the distance, because again, you never know how your body will react on race day. And then have fun. Always trust your training and never give up. That's what I've got. Do we have questions? I wasn't sure. It's like there's something in the chat, but I don't know if I missed it.
Thank you, Ashley. That was wonderful. Thank you.
That was awesome. So good.
You're awesome.
Yeah, does anyone
you.
have any, before we hop off, does anyone have any questions for Ashley? Anything they want to want her to expand on? Anything at all? No. Yeah,
I thought a lot of the new stuff that you added into this webinar was awesome. It wasn't your everyday webinar that I've been watching. I mean, this was great, Ashley. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. No one has any questions. Perfect. Well,
Nope.
I thank you guys for your time. We appreciate it. This has been recorded, so if you want to go back and look at anything, you can feel free to, and Ashley will share the slides with me as well, and I'll email those out to you. So again, if you want to go back and reference anything that she talked about, you'll be able to do so.
Great.
So yeah, everyone have a good night. Our next webinar, like I mentioned, is on March 15th at 7 p.m. And that one will be on training and racing nutrition. And as soon as I get registration open for that, I will send out an email and post it on social media. So it was good seeing some of you, and everyone enjoy their evening. And
Hey, Scott. Hey, Jen. Nice to see you guys.
Hey, Val, you too. Thanks
yeah, I
for
hope
this,
you had a
Sasha. It
good
was great.
dinner.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
I had rice cake and a piece of cheese or something. I don't know. I didn't do what I was supposed to do per Ashley, but I do need to get my 8 to 10 hours sleep. So with
Me
that.
too.
Ever.
Bye, everybody.
All
Thank
right,
you.
bye everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you so
See
much.
ya.
Have a
Bye.
great night.
You
Bye.
too.